the Shop, episode 178, a training masterclass with Emma Haines of London School of Coffee and Caffeina Consulting. Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFurio. I'm your host for the show. I hope you're having an amazing day, and I'm really glad to have you along as we learn about training today with Emma Haines of the London School of Coffee and Caffeina Consulting. And this conversation around the topic of training is definitely one of my favorite. Emma brings such a great energy to the training realm, and she has such a wealth of knowledge and experience to share and insights to give in this conversation. I know you're going to get so much out of this. Now, if you have not yet subscribed to Keys to the Shop, I would encourage you to do so. That way you'll never miss out on a new episode. And of course, if one of these episodes really stands out to you and has impacted your life, I would encourage you to think of some coffee friends who could also use that information and share this with a friend. And thank you so much to all of you who have shared these episodes in this podcast with your friends in the professional coffee world. Now, this episode is brought to you by the wonderful people over at Prima Coffee. Prima Coffee is one of the world's leading specialty coffee equipment suppliers, and they go out of their way to curate the best equipment from all over the world to fit perfectly with your needs. So if you're looking for really amazing professional equipment to use in your store, you're expanding to a second store, and you need to outfit it with just the right equipment for your situation, then this is where Prima Coffee can really help you. Go to prima-coffee.com and see what they have to offer. I know you're going to be impressed. What I think you're also going to be impressed with is the fact that they have so many different resources to offer for free on the website in the form of articles and videos showing how to use this equipment and get the most out of it. And they do this because they're driven to equip you to make the best cup of coffee possible. Go to prima-coffee.com, reach out to them, let them know that you heard about them from this show. Thank you so much, Prima, for your support of Keys to the Shop. This episode is also brought to you by the people who changed the game and continue to lead the way in plant-based performance beverages, and that, of course, is the Pacific Barista Series. The Pacific Barista Series was designed for professional baristas and the standards for excellence that they have for what they serve. So you could be using almond, soy, oat, rice, or coconut. Whatever you choose to use behind the bar, you can be assured that it can stand up to the heat from steaming, produce an amazing texture perfect for latte art, and keep the flavor balance of your beverage focused on coffee. Pacific is a huge supporter of the barista community and specialty coffee globally. The continued development of these wonderful products for us is just a testimony to that fact. So I would encourage you to get these products in your shop, try them out for yourself, and see how it elevates the non-dairy options you give your customers. Go to pacificfoods.com to find out more information. And thank you so much, Pacific, for your support of Keys to the Shop. All right, well, today we are going to be going on a learning journey all about helping other people with their learning journeys. And we are going to be guided along this path by Emma Haines of London School of Coffee. Emma has worked in hospitality and catering for the last 12 years, and for the last 8 years, she has focused on coffee training. In particular, specialty coffee training and how to incorporate specialty elements into commercial environments. And she works all over Europe and beyond, and is a resident trainer at London School of Coffee. She has a strong passion for inclusivity as reflected in her role on the SCA Equity, Diversity, and Inclusivity Taskforce. Emma's delivery of training ensures that the ability to grow to love coffee and turn it into a passion is available to all, regardless of background. Emma is a certified SCA AST in Barista Skills, Sensory, and Brewing. And in this conversation, I think you're going to get a sense for the type of heart and joy that she brings to the training environment. This is the kind of energy that I wish we could spread all over the coffee training world. And hopefully this podcast will help do just that. As the listening audience here at Keys to the Shop is global, I hope that Emma's words have a global impact, and her perspective on training and teaching and helping facilitate the learning journey of her students impacts you. This conversation is not only going to help you become a better trainer in practice and with different insights for how to go about the act of training, but also the philosophy behind why we train and the heart behind it. And Emma brings this in spades today in this conversation. I'm really thankful to have had an opportunity to sit down with her and present this to you. So I hope you're ready to learn about training from one of the world's best. Here now is my conversation with Emma Haines of London School of Coffee and Caffeina Consulting. Emma, welcome to Keys to the Shop. So glad to have you on the show.
Hi, Chris. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to join you.
I've been following you on Instagram and just enjoying the photos of trainees and the sessions that you hold and teaching people as a consultant and a trainer. I was so struck by the joy that I see in the students and in yourself as a trainer. And I knew that this is a person I need to talk to about training, because sometimes training becomes it can become drudgery. It can be stressful, and I so appreciate the spirit that you bring to it. And so I'm really honored to have you on the show today and explore your story and get some perspective to help us as we want to be better trainers, of course. What in your history in coffee brought you to training specifically? I know you've been in coffee for 10 years or a little over 10 years. How did you decide that consulting and training specifically was the thing that you wanted to lean into?
I had a bit of a strange journey, really. I think nobody ever quite realizes that training and coffee are, very, very different things, essentially. I actually started my career. I've been in hospitality for a really long time. And I started my career as a trainer. So I kind of worked my way through and taught. I still can teach. I don't do it a lot, but I still do teach things like food safety, and would do things back of house and front of house. And I think people that I were employed by just kind of realized that I had a bit of a thing for training and people development and mentoring people. And so I got more and more into training. And I then, as opposed to being a coffee professional that wanted to become a trainer, I was a trainer that adored coffee. And I have kind of worked to bring coffee into that. So within my hospitality role, obviously, let's teach someone to make a cappuccino. But way back then, we didn't really have, the guidance wasn't what it was now. And certainly whatever was there, I didn't know much about. So I kind of set out on my own personal journey to learn more so that I could teach better. I had I undertook and gained separate training qualifications, and I kind of learned how to structure lessons, how to look after students, how to mentor people, how to bring new trainers into that kind of world and grow them up and help build them up. And alongside that, I was learning more and more about coffee, and my kind of coffee passion was going from something that I liked and I gravitated towards wanting to teach at the front of house to something that I absolutely adored and realized that I couldn't get out of bed and go to work and not teach. I wanted to do it. So I was just really lucky, I think, that I kind of found this specific area of training that I wanted to focus on. And yeah, it's a good 10 years, I just sort of started my real journey into coffee. And along that route, I started to follow people and realized that there were other people like me that loved coffee as much as me. And wow, this is amazing. I'm not on my own. It can go far beyond that kind of morning cafetiere. And yeah, I just really started to explore it and became an SCAE, as it was then, member, and then started on that training program. And then, finally became a certified AST. But I think for me, it was quite a long journey to get to that. Once I finally got there, it was like, wow, I realize now that I'm where I should have always been. But I'm really grateful that I did it that way round, because as a trainer, it's given me a completely different insight. And it actually, I hope, that it makes me a better trainer, because I have experience of teaching in multiple different setups in colleges, in various different roles. And that for me is really good, and it really strengthens what I can then offer.
What do you feel is the unique set of skills that you brought to the table that, not that they're not present in other coffee trainers, but I'm guessing that when you're passionate about coffee, and this would be myself, I guess, as having held a role as a trainer in the past, it came from doing bar work. It came from being passionate about coffee and then think, well, I'm going to be a trainer. Having that training background, what advantage did that give you specifically that other trainers who start with coffee and then go into training might not get?
There were probably multiple things. I think things like learning how to structure time. That was a big one. We aren't born kind of knowing how to spend our time, and how to utilize the small amount of time we get with students, or, behind the bar or whatever we're doing. We have to kind of learn that. We have to learn to manage that and structure it. So I think that was really beneficial. I already knew how to create a lesson plan, for example. I already knew how to assess students. I already knew how to, one of the big things that, and I try and tell everybody about this, and I try to teach as many people as possible, listening and learning from your students, and how to assess them in quite a quick and clean way, so that when somebody comes into me and it's the first time they've ever trained with me, sometimes I only have a few hours with them, or, if I'm lucky, I might have a day, sometimes it's longer, whatever, but, I have to make assessments really quickly. And I think what I've done and what I am able to do, which can take other people quite a long time, is learn how to do those assessments almost subconsciously. So, I'm immediately within a short period of time, I'm thinking, okay, so over there I've got, somebody that's clearly a visual learner, and I've got somebody over here that, I need to get them out of this chair. They do not need a PowerPoint presentation for the next 2 hours. They need to get hands on, or they need to ensure that I'm giving them, handouts, or they need to be able to sit and doodle while they're listening to me. It's just all those things. And that's great. If you've got a one-to-one training session, or, one trainer to students, it's fairly straightforward. When you've then got a classroom full, it's a whole nother realm. So I think for me, just having that structure and the knowledge and the insight into, how people's learning journeys work, really made it a lot easier for me.
Well, that's fascinating that you are describing something that happens also on the bar, where in customer service, you learn the subconscious cues that customers have, and you react to those things, or how we can get your drink ready before you're even giving your change at the register, because we know you and we recognize a series of steps to take. And in this training relationship, it seems similar, that you know your landscape well enough to relinquish your grip on some part of your lesson plan, where a new trainer might simply, like a new speaker gripping the podium, grip the the lesson plan, and no hell or high water, we're going to stick to this, even if it doesn't work for you.
Yeah, you've really hit the nail on the head there. I think that is one of the really big things. Don't get me wrong, this is not an overnight thing. And I'm always learning, and I want to continue to learn. I really enjoy learning myself. So, but I think one of the things that I am comfortable with now is that, I've trained a lot of people over, a long period of time. Some of those people I'm really lucky to still know and still support. And, I see them in roles now, and I'm that proud mother hen. I look at them and I think, oh, I remember when you didn't even know what an espresso was, or, you'd never seen a grinder before. And, it's really exciting for me. But I think that over that time, I've become confident in my skill set as a trainer. So, for example, exactly like what you just said, if I have somebody come in and I'll have a structured lesson plan, sometimes I look at it, sometimes I don't, because if it's something I've taught multiple times, I already know the content, I know roughly how we've got to roll that day. But I am always comfortable enough and confident enough to be led and guided by the needs of my students. There is no point in me teaching somebody something if they, I may as well be speaking it in a different language. You have to read your students. And I think we've probably all at points in our careers or personally with any interest we have, whatever, we've probably all had times where we've sat in front of somebody and they have put something up on a screen and they have scrolled through it and we've looked at it and we've panicked and we've thought, I don't understand. And we're too nervous to put our hand up because everybody else is nodding along, and an hour and a half later, you're still staring at a screen and you still are clueless on what's going on. And so I think for me, it's like rule number one is make my students comfortable and make them know that, there is no such thing as a stupid question. And don't get me wrong, I have to exercise extreme patience at times, but it's worth it in the long run, because I have people come in on professional level courses. And I think one of the really lovely things, some of the nicest feedback I ever get is that they will quietly say to me afterwards, Emma, I was so anxious because people feel I should know this information. They assume I know it. They assume I know it because I've been, head of coffee for the last 5 years. They assume I know how to do this because I've been managing a site for however long. And I don't shame them. There is no shame. There is no assumption. They just know that they are in a safe space. I've created, hopefully, I always aim to create this really safe, fun learning space. And they come into that and there is no judgment. And I think that for me, that really is important. But again, it all relates back to the confidence. If I was an anxious trainer that was new to it, which we are all anxious, and I teach new modules or I teach new classes, and of course I'm anxious. I'm anxious because I care about the quality and I care about what my students get from it. But I think that the underlying thing for me is that I'm confident enough to know it's okay not to know, and it's okay to say to your student, look, we're all learning. There's a great quote, if you want to learn something, teach it. And that's so true. I learn from my students as much as they learn from me often, and it's a really lovely thing to be involved in.
100%. That's I'm really glad you shared that, because so many people who want to and are expected to perform at high levels within this industry will put on a show for the industry in order to get hired or to seem more competent in an area, and then in the long run it doesn't serve their career well because they end up just never fully understanding something for fear of seeming out of it or ignorant of a fact. And I'm reminded of Colin Harmon when he was on the show a long ways back in the early part of this podcast, mentioned that when he was competing for his first national title, he didn't know what a natural was, but he was a champion. And the gap between those two things is something we always have to navigate. And it's so funny because every time somebody gets vulnerable and admits that they don't know, everybody else seems to release the tension and they breathe a sigh of relief. Like, oh, me too. Let's talk about that.
That's so true. That is so true. I mean, it is one of the most amazing things, to have a class full of people. They're all, people, it's just human instinct. They come in there, I've got this job and I work for these people and I know my stuff. And then they sit next to somebody else and they're thinking the same and they're a bit anxious and they're, they want to learn and they're looking forward to learning, but they kind of, sit there with this almost not a mask, that's probably not fair, but almost this kind of like everybody's assuming, something about the person next to them. And I think that, I know I'm doing a good job. I know I'm doing what my students need when I see exactly that. There's almost this, there'll be points in it where you can hear, it's like an audible sigh, like, oh, I'm so glad you said that because I've been wondering the same thing for the last 2 years and yet I'm too terrified to ask. And I think, that for me is such a beautiful thing to be able to facilitate. And that is what I see my role as, I facilitate somebody's learning journey. I'm there to guide them and support them. I'm not there to prove to them what I know. I have qualifications that back up my knowledge. If you need to see them, you can see them. And if if we want to get into deep conversations about things, we can. And don't get me wrong, I mean, I love going down the rabbit hole as much as the next coffee professional. I really, really do. But at the same time, I'm not there just to lecture my students on what a great amount of knowledge I have. And I think that, the knowledge is there and I have to be guided by them. And if they are ready for the next level of knowledge, they get it. And if they're not, then we bring them to a space and a point in time where they are ready for it. And I just think that's really nice. And I think that comes really with kind of experience and confidence and, just again, harping back to that, being able to read your students.
So it's evident what your values are and how you view your role as a trainer. And I think that's something that we should all emulate in our roles as when we find ourselves in various roles as a trainer, whether we're a trainer or not. A lot of baristas are going to wear that hat, even if they're not getting paid to do so, because they're going to show a new person the ropes, and they could tap into some of that knowledge and use those things in that situation, even if it's not in a lab setting or a classroom setting. And it kind of leads to my next question here, which is, you do both consulting and which is takes place in shops and stores all over, as well as these classes, which are a controlled environment. How does this differ? How does your approach differ in both settings? Because I imagine it has to a bit.
Yeah, I mean, without a doubt, it's a very different experience. I mean, we are so lucky at London School of Coffee that, we have 2 floors of just a, beautiful sort of bespoke space. It's amazing. I have a cupping lab downstairs. I have a brew bar. I have 6, 7 coffee machines, varying different espresso machines and grinders. It's amazing. But the rest of the time I am exactly, doing what you say, going on site, fighting fire, often because people call me out of sheer panic, or, their own in-house trainer can't make it, or, they need someone to cover, or something's going terribly wrong with the site. And I'm kind of there to just do the best that I can in that space. And I think it varies essentially because we are able to be more controlled. In, when we have a set up training space, I like to think that people get, I wouldn't say more from it, but they are able to explore more, and they are able to relax more. But then there is also this fun kind of challenge for me as a trainer where, you give me a board marker and I'll give you a training session on the underground, or get on a tube line and do it for you because the knowledge is in me, it's in my brain. And I can pretty much do a training session anywhere. I mean, I laugh, but I've done it, in the middle of a field. I've done it, we've done some fun challenges over my career, and it's great fun to do that. I think again, going back to that, reading the student and learning the student. I mean, what I like about taking them out of their site is that they are forced to, for even just those few hours, they are forced to come away from that behind the bar mindset. You are in this space, you haven't got a customer glaring at you, you haven't got somebody asking you to clear the plates after lunch, you haven't got to worry about, recalibrating straight after that lunch rush, whatever. You're here to learn. And I think that the experience for them is very different. But when we go on site, obviously we do have the benefit that I am able to literally physically implement things there and then. So it's just needs, what somebody needs at the time. But yeah, I mean, if you can take them out of their workspace and you can, remove them from that work environment and place them into a learning environment, and it really, what you can teach them in the time that you have is massive.
Well, how do you approach the needs of a shop? Because oftentimes you enter a situation for one thing, but you notice about 12 other things. And it's always hard. And, as a consultant myself, it's difficult to try to control myself to focus on the task at hand, but then be able to truly help so that maybe the future looks a little brighter. It's not going to be a recurring issue. There are some things that I want to take care of that are not necessarily why I was called to be there. But how do you navigate those things? Because there's all sorts of different tangled relationships and authority and system issues that you can see when you're holding these training sessions. How do you manage those two ends of what you notice and what you were doing at the moment?
It can be. There's no denying it can be very difficult. I mean, you'll know yourself. You can go to a site. You're there to deliver. I don't know, a 2-hour on-site training plan. This is what we're going to do today. You get there and you realise that there are far more pressing issues. And you're sort of thinking, hang on, this is like, I'm shoveling snow uphill here because I'm going to do one thing. And actually, it's almost like I'm putting out this tiny fire here, but, the back of the kitchen's on fire and I'm ignoring that. And it can be really difficult to kind of wade your way through. I mean, really, I find, this sounds so cliched, but honesty and building relationships with my clients. Sometimes, they don't want to listen. They don't want to invest. They don't want to make changes. But for my own, I guess, self-worth and, my own, I don't know, just for my own peace of mind, I always feel that I have to let the client know. So I'll go there, I'll do the job that they've employed me to do. But if I feel that they could actually benefit more out of doing, something different or changing up other things or focusing on different areas, I feel that if I keep that to myself, I'm doing a disservice. It's kind of, it becomes painfully obvious sometimes to me, only obvious to me because I'm that outsider. I'm giving it that holistic approach and they aren't able to because, they can't see it because they're too involved in it. And I will just say to them as early on as possible, look, I'm happy to do this, but I think actually you're going to get much more value for money or happier staff or happier customers if we actually do this. And most of the time people are willing to listen. I think they just know as well that, I'm not out to rip people off. Weirdly, it's such a strange setup. People will be saying to me, Emma, don't forget you need to send me an invoice. And that's because I'm so involved in them and doing what's right for them. And I'm like, oh gosh, yeah. Because, I do actually need to feed the children this month and I do actually need to pay the bills. But it's because I'm so passionate about what I do and I want them to do well and I want everybody to be happy and, doing the best they can do, that I think they just know, people just trust me now. They know that I'm focused on what's best for them. There's never an ulterior motive with me. I'm going in for their benefit.
So this is a position from generosity. It's more than what they asked for. It's what you noticed. And of course, I'm sure that they can see that and feel that when you are bringing it up to them. And when you have their best interest in mind, for me, it comes back to the shop dynamics when you have to have a heart-to-heart with an employee, and they'll know whether it's coming from a place of caring for them or if it's just trying to get them in line so you don't have to deal with them anymore. And the former is the one that gains the most, has the most traction to it and gets people to change or accept change more often than not. And, the same thing, I guess, could apply to the school setting where people are there to learn something in particular, but just like we were talking about where somebody wants to talk about something that's maybe not on the lesson plan and you pivot to take care of that. I imagine it's the same type of approach where you have to figure out how to balance what people want with what they actually need.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that most of the time, people have a goal. What is it that you want to achieve? Why are they bringing me on board, basically? Are they bringing me on board just because they think that their staff could know a bit more, or they want to prove to their staff that they're investing in them, which is great? Or are they bringing me on board because ultimately they want to invest in their staff, which is, going to have this knock-on effect, in the long run? And I think that generally, because everything kind of fits together, I will say to them, we're able to get to this place, but, if you trust me to guide you, and you know what, as well, I'm not adverse to saying to people at all. And again, I think this all helps. Ultimately, this goes towards people thinking, yeah, well, we can trust what she's going to tell us, because I'll say to them, you know what, guys, actually, I don't think you need me. Or, I'll come and do this bit of training with you, but actually what I think you need is to do this. And, you don't need me to do that for you. And I think that's really unusual, because people sort of say to me, oh, right, okay. Whereas I think they kind of expect me to say, oh, guys, oh gosh, no. Oh, you're going to need me for 6 months on a retainer. Thank you very much. And I mean, we laugh all the time, because it's like, I'll never be a millionaire, because but for me, that's the right thing, because then next time they come back to me and they're like, gosh, you know what? She was so honest with us that we want her again, or we want to take her advice on this, or we're setting up our next shop, or, a roastery wants to increase their wholesale offering, and they just know they can trust me. And I think that it is about building that relationship, building that trust. And, the nicest thing for me is, even with new clients that I haven't worked with or for before, generally, they can ask around, and most of the time, you might find somebody, or I'll give you somebody to talk to, that I've worked with, and you can hear it from them. Don't take it from me. Hear it from them, and see where they were on their journey and where they now are on their journey. And sometimes I've been heavily involved, and other times all I've done is just give them some guidance and, the odd bit here and there. And I think it, for me, that just seems right, and it all builds that trust.
And you're very secure in yourself, in your role as a trainer, and that helps. And a lot of trainers have the need to prove themselves at every session by giving things that aren't necessarily helpful, or just out of an insecurity of their own knowledge of a subject, try to impress. And in those moments where you're honest and you have a trust-based relationship with your client, it ebbs and flows. It goes a revelation in one moment to just maybe, I don't want to say dull, but it's not always a high of learning. It's going to go up and down, but that's what relationships are about. And I'm kind of thinking about the trainers who, for most people who occupy a training position, they're in-store trainers. Baristas who get promoted to in-store trainers, they are going to be the ones who have face-to-face contact with the people they train every day. And taking a page from your playbook here, I think, would be wise for all of us in that position, because you can't just escape to the office and not have these relationships. In fact, it seems like these relationships are the biggest asset that you have in getting people to actually absorb the information and adopt it versus just check it off of a box. Bearing that in mind, how do we avoid just having people memorize versus learn? There's a difference between the two. And how do you go about setting people up to learn versus just, tick off boxes and memorize facts?
I know personally I don't learn well in that instance. If you sat me down and made me write something down 10 times over, I'll write it down 10 times over, but it's probably not going to be retained. So I kind of make that assumption with all of my students. I learn, or I encourage them to learn through doing, through experimentation, through trial and error. Let's put it into practice, and let's make sure that and at the back of this, as a trainer, I'm visually watching. I'm watching all the time. It happens every training session. I'll be running a Barista Skills, and I can be downstairs perhaps at the school, and I'm getting something out of the cupboard. Oh, I'm just going to grab something, guys, and I'll be back in a second. They're steaming milk, and I literally I'm at the bottom of the stairs. I'm not even in the same room, and I'm like, you need to tilt that jug. And they're like, she's not even here, and she knows what we're doing. But that's because you know how it is. You just know what it is you need them to achieve, and so therefore I'm always assessing. I've kind of got this assessor mentor thing going on in the back of my brain constantly, and I can't switch it off, much to my husband's annoyance. I just can't switch it off ever. It's just ingrained in me. So I think for me, I'll get people to write things down. They can jot things down. They can write on the board. We can do whatever you need. You can take your handouts. But actually, I want to see that you understand it. And I need you to prove to me that you understand it. And for me, because of my personality and the way that I like students to feel around me, I don't test them in a really negative kind of fine, prove it to me way, but just constantly throughout the day. And I'm just always assessing. And I mean, I really hope that by mixing up all these sort of learning styles, if you like, and by getting people to do that. I mean, we do peer-to-peer learning in a class. So I'll say, you're going to take on the role of the assessor. Mm-hmm. And they're like, what? And I'm like, but I've only just learned the steps on how to pull an espresso. And I'm like, and that's fine. I'm going to give you a checklist and you're going to check it off. And, straight away, they're kind of like, oh, wow. And I just, that most of the time, the majority of the time I'm dealing with adults, and I train some youngsters sometimes, but, we're all adults and we can be given a sense of responsibility. And I think that for me, again, is really important. I'm happy to relinquish that because I'm always in control of that class. But I'll have somebody, on a station over here and they're working together and they're practicing their flat white and, we're timing a session here and I've got somebody on this station over here and actually these two people are practicing dialing in. And they need to work out how to adjust the dose on this grinder, and we're going to do it quicker and streamline it and make it more efficient. And, and people will sometimes walk into my training session and they'll be like, wow, like this is just a hive. Like there's so much going on. How do you know? And I'm like, because I know what each one of these students are doing. I know the level they're at. I know how they're coping, and I'm glancing around that room and I can see, and also you can just see in people's eyes, help me, Emma, I'm not getting this, or, I just kind of know where we're at generally. And I think that for me is the main way to not become that kind of tick box learner. Let's just do it and actually make it happen. And then they're just naturally proving it to me.
How do you know? How do they prove it to you? What is that? I know this might be an impossible thing to ask you, but because it's so innate at this point, but there has to be a point at which you say, okay, you've got it. Have a great career,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the hardest things can be knowing how much information to give and at what point. I'm excitable, especially when I've had a couple of coffees first thing. And I get up at the crack of dawn and I get to my training session and I'm all set up. And my students arrive and I'm like, yeah, let's do this, and I'm really excited. And I want to get started and I want to learn about them. I think one of the things that I've had to learn, and don't get me wrong, I did it in the beginning and sometimes I still do it now and I have to stop myself like, oh, don't do this. You know better than this, Emma. And it's about, knowing what I want their outcomes to be for that day. So, I will always say to any trainers that I'm maybe mentoring or just assisting or giving a hand to or whatever, I will say to them, plan it and know what outcomes you want for that session and know what outcomes you want for that person's training journey with you. And, how do we assess those outcomes? I want this person to be able to set up their workstation, dial in their grinder, pull a really good espresso, steam a beautiful flat white or steam a great cappuccino, and do this within this time frame. I want them to be able to troubleshoot if their shot is not running correctly. What's going to be the most likely cause? How do I look at that? How do I stay calm? So there'll be, for me, there's a list of steps. And I kind of always know what outcomes I want for them. And so that helps me, I guess, assess. And sometimes that, we do a lot of theory. We have a lot of information that is given to people. And I'm infamous for scribbling stuff up on the board and, really dodgy drawings and writing in a really wonky way across the board. But it's like, we have to have that as well. And we need to get that down and we need to get that ingrained. But again, at every point, we're learning about coffee processing. Let me get these green samples out for you. Let me show you some dried cherries, because chances are you've never seen them before. Let me show you, what parchment looks like. Let me show you, and that's great, because then I've got people not only looking at it and making a note about it. I look round and they're drawing and they're doodling and they're copying my weird drawings off the board, and they're picking up these dried coffee cherries and they're breaking them open, and they're, and that to me is learning. And I know that it's going in. And I mean, obviously when we have certified training, so if I do the SCA stuff, we have a theory exam and then we have a practical element. So, I'm assessing them formally in that sense. But even when we're not running certified and I'm doing in-house or I'm, on-site training, there's always ways for me to assess. I'm asking those questions to the group. I'm asking, or getting them to take on that role as the trainer, just in a little role play setup, and it really, really helps to kind of give me that overall assessment.
That's lovely. Yes, I love that training.
Sorry, that's a big open question.
That's fine.
I hope it makes sense.
I love the training each other aspect of it. The peer-to-peer learning is from my own experience, has been fruitful as well, where people are very tentative about it. And then they, like you said, you learn by training, you learn by teaching, because you're forced to think about it in an organized way. And there is sort of a boxing things off, like the theory. Now we've done theory. Now we're going to do practice, and practice is practice and theory is theory. Although the theory is like music theory. The more you know, the better you can play. How do you purposefully infuse the things that you put up on a slide presentation and test people for on paper when they're actually pulling the shot? Are you overlaying the same message in repetition to say, remember what we talked about before in this theory class? Here we see it in action. Is that the kind of thing that you do throughout your training sessions?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for example, we might be doing a brewing class and we've been talking about maybe processing and the impact that has on the final cup. And I'm looking at, every time, I know what we're going to brew next. I know what coffees I'm bringing out for them to brew. I know what I am hoping, to know roughly what they're going to find or what they're looking to find in this particular coffee, for example, or this brew method, for example. And, I'll be saying to them, okay, so what are you getting from this? Oh, actually, it's really full bodied, or it's quite sweet, or it's this. And then I'll then spin it and say, okay, so now just think, why might it have those nuances? And then they're like, oh yeah, could that be a? And then they're forced to think back to that theory. The other thing that we do is, we'll have notebooks or scraps of paper or whatever they've chosen to write down on. And, I'll say to them all the time, you know what, guys, I want to see those notes covered in coffee because I kind of want to see those notes next to where you're brewing that V60. I want to see you with that book open, reading what you've just written in a theory sense, when you pull a shot. I want you to be referring back to that. And if that means that those bits of paper get covered in coffee, then good. That to me is the sign of a good session. And they're like, okay, whatever. What is she on about? But it's really true. I think that we can write essays on things. If we don't pick it up and use it and incorporate it into the practical, and put it into practice, then, really, how relevant is it? I read books all the time. I, fall asleep reading a book and reading something more about water science or, what's happening in a certain part of a coffee growing community. But, that knowledge goes in, but if I'm not using it, I just lose it. So I think, just constantly throughout all of that practical, we need to be testing that theory and we need to be making sure that they realize it's happening. This is why I sat you down and spoke to you about an espresso recipe. This is why I spoke to you and introduced the terms, dose and yield, because now we're doing it. And, I try not to give them everything. I want people to work for it a bit, and I have to assess their level, and I have to look at how much time we have and, how much we can physically achieve in that period of time, and make it all relevant. But, most of the time I'm making them work for it. And the other thing that I do, which I find works really well, is I'm not frightened to just like stick my hand up in the middle of a practical session and say, right, stop what you're doing. And that might be because, I've got 12 people in that class, and one person over here on station 3 has just pulled the most under-extracted shot of the class. And that to me is a brilliant, excellent. I'm so happy you pulled that shot. And they're like, what? It's terrible. And I'm like, good, because now we learn. And now we learn what that under-extracted espresso tastes like. And I'll do that all the time. And I'm like, everybody gather around. Or somebody's pulled a particularly amazing, beautiful, really balanced shot. Right, let's stop. Let's share it. Or somebody does a really great job with steaming their milk. And they're a group of completely new students. They've never steamed milk before. And then all of a sudden, right, let's stop. Let's appreciate that. And let that person sometimes relay back to us how they did it. Because, I'm the trainer, and sometimes I'm lucky enough to have a really great assistant trainer with me, and we know what we're doing, and we're telling you what it is and how it is and how to get there. But sometimes my students have the most beautifully eloquent way of simplifying what I'm trying to say. So I give them a space to say it. I never forget once explaining, I can't even remember what it was. It was like an espresso brew formula. And one of my students I gave this like long-winded explanation, and I showed this and I showed that. And then at the end of it, he came up with this sentence, that simplified everything I'd said in the last 5 minutes. And I was like, yeah, basically what David just said. And it was, to this day, it's still just one of my favorite moments because it was so brilliant. And the lovely thing about that is because, my students appreciate that. They're like, yeah, see, she gets it. She's happy for us to tell her back. She's happy for us to recap. And, and if they know a better way to explain it, I'm all ears. Because maybe they've been through that learning journey, or it's just clicked in their mind at that point. So let's tell it, share it. I make sure they're sharing the right information, of course. And sometimes, I have to correct that, but I want them to be confident to say that. And I think what you said earlier as well is that I'm well aware that a lot of people that come through my, my training sessions will be people that are expected to go out and teach this. And there might not be certified trainers, but, they've got a manager or, a shop owner or whatever that is expecting them because they're the experienced one. They're the one that they're paying to put through the sessions. So therefore you are going to relay all that information back to the rest of the team. And that's a big ask. That's a really big responsibility for people.
A lot of people are put in that position, and you just mentioned it. The folks that come through your school will be expected to set up their own school in some way back in their own labs. And speaking to trainers, as you've just gone through in this conversation and illustrated so many great tactics, and not just tactics, but just modes of being as a facilitator of people's success and learning these important lessons in coffee. What advice would you have to trainers in the specialty industry based on your experience? And of course, I know you can't have gone all these years with just successes in training.
Absolutely.
So from your experience in the ups and downs of training, what are some do's and don'ts for us that are entering into the training sphere to be the most successful?
I think one of the things that has stuck with me for years, it was a little very cliched quote from a non-coffee trainer that was delivering essentially train the trainer training to me. And, they put this statement up on the board, and it was, failing to plan is planning to fail. And I was like, oh, yeah, whatever, whatever, guys, we know what we're teaching. And now I'm like, yeah, that is so true. And I think that you can be an exceptional coffee professional. You could win any championship. You could be, absolutely incredible at smashing that queue, putting a smile on everybody's faces. You are the best behind the bar. You're incredible. It doesn't make you a good trainer automatically. And I think that it's okay to accept that and to learn. You can learn, if not how to become, a full-on trainer, at least some better ways to teach people. And I think that, doing some research, taking some time out to plan your sessions, taking some time to ask. I say to everybody, I don't care whether you've ever spoken to me before or not. If you are a fellow trainer and you've got either tips for me, I'm all ears, please tell me, I love to discuss it. Or if you just need some guidance with running a training session, ask me. And I'll say to you, do you know what? The best thing you could maybe do, given the time you've got, is, write a lesson plan and do this. And I'm happy to, to share that with people all the time. But I think you've got to plan what you want people to achieve out of it. You're taking their learning. This is their careers. This is not something that should be taken lightly. Even if it is their first session behind the bar and they're just doing a Saturday job, it doesn't matter. That's the first step in their career. And, you need to really understand and value that, I think, as a trainer. And I feel privileged. If someone chooses me, whether that's as a consultant to help them roll out their wholesale sales or whatever, or as a trainer, I really, really feel privileged that people come to me and value, what they want from me. So I think that you need to always plan your lessons. I think that you need to, gosh, this is probably super unpopular, but I think you just need to be like totally, just scrap any arrogance. It's not about you. They come into your session and this is not for you to tell them how amazing you are. They know you're amazing. That's why they've turned up to listen to you. Just everybody in that room is awesome. They've all got their own journeys. They've all got some really exciting things to share. They've all got their own experiences. Make the space about them. Some of the best trainers that I've learned from have been those that they wouldn't dream of laughing at me unless I maybe ask a really ridiculous question, which, I do. But, they embrace it and they're so respectful, and we have fun, and I feel safe asking questions. Imagine as well as somebody that's been an AST for years and prior to that, just a coffee trainer as a whole, for me to go to training, if I have any, inhibitions about asking questions, I'm not going to learn. So I just ask them, and if that trainer judges me for it, then, well, that's up to them. I'm not frightened to ask questions. And I think that that's one of the really big things that people need to be aware of. It doesn't make you a bad coffee professional. It doesn't make you a bad trainer. And if people come to me and ask, or they ask other people, or that I see it on, groups or forums about how they can do stuff and make that coffee session better, I really think that's amazing. I'm super happy that they're even in a position in their life that they can ask that. And they feel comfortable to ask that. But I think just planning and be super organized with it. It's always going to go wrong. You are always going to have a session that goes completely up the wall. Oh my goodness, some of the things that have happened during training sessions. I traveled about 250 miles to deliver a training session, and when I got there, they had one espresso grinder and it wouldn't work at all, and it was like, we're in the middle of nowhere. I had a tiny little grinder that I'd just taken, that I happened to just travel around in the boot of my car all the time. We used that. The grind size was atrocious. I couldn't teach what I needed to teach, but you know what? You just have to work with it. And I did the best that I could. And as it happens, we then reorganized another session and it was fine. But, these things happen. And if I weren't kind of pre-prepared, then I have this decision-making time that is very, it's a teeny tiny window, and I've got to decide how I'm going to behave, when something goes wrong, or if I have a student that is really not playing ball, which, is rare, but it does happen. I've got to make a split-second decision about what way I want this training session to go. And I can categorically say, I don't want that training session to be a complete waste of time. I don't want it to be a train wreck. So I do whatever I can at that moment in time, even if that is call a break. Guys, we're going to take 10 minutes, and then I go into a silent panic, a really good poker face. How am I going to rectify this? And you just come up with a plan, and you work a way around it. And I think, as long as you're planned that session, as long as you're organized, as long as you know what you want them to achieve, you'll find ways. And the other trick is just have a few kind of extras up your sleeve. You'll spend all this time creating beautiful lesson plans, and you plan the entire day down to the minute details. And then you get there and they fly through it, and you're like, I've got another hour and a half. Wow. And to me, again, I'm lucky. And also I teach, multiple modules. So great. If you're that good, then I'm going to teach you something else. I've usually got something else I can, just start them on, or I can give them a demonstration of something. But I think always having that as well, because you don't want students to be bored. And sometimes they are exceptional and they are learning very quickly. So then excellent. Keep their interest, keep them, really concentrating, and throw some new stuff at them. So that would be my tips.
That's great, because there are definitely people who are hired with experience, and the trainer has them in the same class as people with no experience. And you've got to have something, like you say, up your sleeve to occupy their time as well. That's really great. And I love your discussion of planning and arrogance, especially because as you're speaking, you're very confident. You're very confident in what you want people to do. Having everybody stop what they're doing, showing a bad shot to the entire class. That's confidence, knowing that it's not going to be taken as a embarrassing moment because they know your heart. The fine line between confidence and arrogance seems to come from proving to people through a genuine desire for their success that what you do and what you say, as loud as you have to be sometimes in a group that size, or as confident as you have to be to actually guide them without devolving into chaos, is not done out of aggression but out of compassion.
Yeah, I think that for me, it's funny. Everybody always says I'm really confident, and I just couldn't have the confidence you have. And it's like, wow, really? Like, I don't feel confident, which sounds ridiculous. I suffer really badly with this real imposter syndrome. And I often will have moments of, oh my goodness, why have they chosen me? Why am I doing this? Why am I here? Why am I speaking? Or, why am I the one running this class? Gail at the school is incredible. The amount of time she has to listen to me go, oh, and then 5 minutes later I'm mid-flow and we're away with it, and it's amazing. So I think that I'm completely, I have this the same as a lot of other people, I have this real anxiety. If I'm teaching a new module or meeting a new client, and training a new group, sometimes I might not sleep very well. There can be multiple things for me, going on in the background. But I think the key thing for me is not just thinking of others. It's again, I kind of just bring on this mask, and it's not about me, and it's not about my worries. It's about them and what they're going to learn. And, I think that's how I kind of manage it. I try to most of the time anyway. I still get anxious. I sat for 20 minutes panicking prior to you calling, it's, I still get really, really panicky about things. But I think as well, if you're passionate about something, and I'm lucky, I've found my dream job. I could win the lottery tomorrow and I swear I would still have my clients, because I actually love what I do. And I know how lucky I am to have that. Because not only am I working in an industry where I am so passionate, I am so passionate about growers. I am so passionate about, sustainability of coffee and supporting, what's going on at Origin. Like, I am super passionate about it. But not only that, I'm passionate about people. And supporting people and watching people grow. And so being a coffee trainer and, consultant within this space is just like, it is a dream for me. It really, really is. And I think people just know that. They know if you want to be in that room with them. They know if you're enjoying that session. And I have to go sometimes from running, I'll be running a professional brewing class for 3 days. And we have gone so far down that rabbit hole that everybody's got a migraine because they can't. It's like we've got so in depth on everything, to the next day running an intro to coffee. And that's hard. It is really hard because I've got to be as passionate about it with the new people, because the new people are going to be those people on that professional brewing class in a couple of years' time, and it's my job to get those newbies as excited about it as, the guys on the Brewing Pro were the day before, so it is hard. But I think that is for me, like the true way to manage it is I just forget that it's about me. And I forget about my worries, and, I just have to focus on them. And when I'm doing things for others, it just seems to work for me. I don't want to be the one competing. I want to be the one supporting someone from the sidelines saying, I know you've got this, I've watched you do this. That's what excites me. That's what gets me, up every morning.
Well, I feel like you've done that in this conversation here, and it's evident that, we're lucky to be hearing from you today and to get the benefit from all of your years of learning about helping people learn, and your students especially get the benefit of that. And I'm so honored to have had you on the show to get us excited about training and help us facilitate our success as trainers. Where can we go to learn more about Caffeina Consulting and what you do at London Coffee School?
Thank you, firstly. When I got your email to ask, it was a super, super exciting afternoon. So it's an absolute pleasure to be talking to you in person. It's great. To learn more about London School of Coffee, we have a website, which is just londonschoolofcoffee.com. And I do have a website that, funnily enough, I never really look at or use. It's caffeinaconsulting.com. I'm always on Instagram, and people communicate with me through there quite a lot. Drop me an email. And I want, one of the big things for me is you don't have to be coming to me to pay me lots of money to consult for you. You can just reach out as a fellow trainer, as somebody that one day wants to be a trainer, or, as somebody that likes drinking coffee at home and wants to just learn a bit more about it and how to get into it. I'll listen to you all. That's what I'm here for. So, I love it when people sort of reach out and, just make sure, you can do that. It's a really beautiful family to be part of. The coffee industry is phenomenal, and I've never known anything else like it. And, I want everybody to embrace that and feel a part of it.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Emma, for coming on the show and sharing, and for doing what you do. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, one of the things that I think is obvious throughout this conversation is just the level of sincerity and genuine care that Emma has for each student's success, and how that works out to what happens in the classroom is that she provides that kind of environment where you can ask a question, where you can admit that you don't know something, and she wants you to feel safe to be able to ask those questions. And, if she is confident in her role to bring out those topics that others might not feel confident to bring out. So if you're listening to this and you're in the position of teaching somebody about coffee, I think that's one of the major takeaways from this conversation is being a facilitator of somebody's learning journey is to create an environment, even if it's just in a relationship between you and them, if it's a one-on-one situation, not even in a lab. That environment of relationship between you two can be free from pretension, open to questions, free of judgment. And when you do that, you're more likely to be successful in helping somebody actually learn versus just memorize and pass a test or get a certification. Because that's not what it really is about. It's not just about getting certifications. It's about embodying the information and having it at the ready when it counts. And I'm really thankful that we have people in this coffee world like Emma doing this kind of work and helping people learn coffee in heart and mind. So thank you so much, Emma, for joining me on the show and teaching us about training. Thank you for all you do, and we really appreciate you. Now, if you want to learn more information about what Emma does, you can go to London School of Coffee.com, where she is a resident instructor. You can learn about the courses that they offer there. Now, if you want to hire Emma for consulting or training, you can find more information about that over at Caffeina Consulting. That's just caffeine with an A instead of an E, consulting.com. I'll link to that in the show notes as well. Now, of course, if you want to hear a little bit more of what Emma has to say about training, and in particular, what major milestone in her life as a coffee professional really had the most impact on her, I think her answer to this is really fascinating. It is the bonus audio for this episode, and it's available to you if you are on the Keys to the Shop email list. All you have to do is go to keystotheshop.com. At the bottom of the page, you can put your name and email address in, and you'll be signed up to receive the weekly email that has not only the transcript from each episode, but also bonus audio with guests at Keys to the Shop, like Emma Haines. So again, go to keystotheshop.com and sign up for that. And if you want to reach out to me, you can do so just by emailing chris@keystotheshop.com. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback about the show or anything else, that's the email to use, chris@keystotheshop.com. And with that, we are done with our show today. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have an amazing week. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.